All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. I'm going to start preparing my lectures for the AWD Application and Web Development 1000 Web Development Technologies class for the fall 2019 semester. All right, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start going through the PowerPoints for Murox HTML and CSS3 4th edition. When I get done with those, I'm going to go over the PowerPoints for Murox, JavaScript, and jQuery 3rd edition. Why? Because those are the two books we use for the class. All right, but if I look at the table of contents here, and I can get most of it up here, I am going to go through right near the beginning, lesson 1, then lesson 2, or section 2, then section 3. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with section 4 on the how to design a website. So that's what I'm going to go through first. All right. And when you look at this, notice what's in here. I don't want to sit and read to you, but I want to go over this first because I want to tell you how I plan on teaching this course. All right. So yeah, I will go over the PowerPoints for this, but even before I do that, I want to walk through the chapter itself. All right, and I've got it here someplace. There it is. So this is the beginning of section 4, web design and deployment. As it says in chapter 17, you'll learn how to design the pages for a website. You'll also learn the guidelines that will help you create an effective website. Now, I'm not going to go through chapter 18 yet because that's when you're all done and it's on deploying a website. All right, so I'm not going to go through that, but I am going to go through chapter 17 right now. So this is kind of, for lack of better words, this is a prelude for the class itself. All right. So it says in this chapter you'll have a much better idea on how to design a website. And this is what's going to be discussed in here. Users and usability, design guidelines, how to design a website, other design considerations. And I don't have any idea how long this will take. Right now, we're 2.5 minutes in. All right, my guess is 20 or less minutes. Okay. Before you design a website, you need to think about who your users are going to be and what they're going to expect. This makes sense. It's the users who will determine the success or failure of your website. Well, what I'm going to do, and I had my students do this in the fall of 2018, but we're going to build a website. Okay, we're going to build it from scratch. I have no idea what it's going to look like, etc., except it's going to be a website for a gym. This is again what I had my students do. GYM, a gym, an athletic facility. All right. Why? Well, it's something anyone could use, potentially. Male, female, young, old, nothing matters. Be open to everybody. Okay. So what web users want is usability. What do users want when they reach a website? Well, you know as well as I do that they're looking for different things. But regardless, the majority of people who go to a website want to get in, want to get out. So they want to get in and do whatever it is they want to do, and then they want to get out. All right. As it says here on the top of the screen, if users can't find what they're looking for quickly, or they get too frustrated, they'll leave. All right? Without even checking out the site. Well, I want people to join the gym, and one way we're going to let them join is through the website. All right? So it says, in web development terms, what the users want is usability. It refers to how easy it is to use a website. Usability is one key factor that determines the effectiveness of a website. Should make sense. So, Figure 17.1 presents one page of a website that has a high degree of usability, and it gives you 3 guidelines for improving usability. Well, let's take a look at that. There it is. All right. So, first, you should try to present the critical information in what's called above the fold. Now, if you've never heard of that, this goes back to the old days of newspapers where a newspaper quite often inside of a newspaper machine, when I say machine, I guess holder, where you put money in and took your paper out, was folded in half. And the top half, which was called above the fold, is where you put the information that made, that it was most pertinent, that the user wanted to see. In much the same way here, it says, when you talk about how easy it is to use the website, all right, what you want to do is you want to put the critical information near the top. Second, you should try to keep related items, or try to group related items into separate components and limit the number of components in each page. You could even make a case that this page is pretty doggone busy. But the idea is, regardless of how you're doing this, you don't want to overwhelm the user. Third, you should adhere to the current conventions for website usability. For instance, clickable links should look like they're clickable. Items that aren't clickable shouldn't look like they are. All right, so again, find out what you're looking for as quickly and easily as possible. Get in and get out. People don't read a web page like you'd read a book. Rather, they have a tendency to just scan the page to see what they're looking for. Some of the current conventions for usability are discussed, and some of them are shown here. All right. Usually the header, for example, consists of a logo, which may or may not have some text that goes along with it. Maybe some kind of utilities like a search, etc. Then underneath it should have some kind of a navigation bar. All right, that's pretty standard. So again, logo typically consists, the header of a logo, a tagline, utilities, and nav bar. The tagline shows what's unique about the website. The nav bar provides links that divide the site into sections. The utilities consist of links to useful but not primary information. If the site requires search, you should put it up in the header area. All right, underlined text. Anything that's in here that's underlined, I don't see anything, but if there is anything that's underlined, should be a link. The image, typically on here, if you see these, you should be able to click the image or you should be able to click the text. If you click a cart symbol, you should be able to go to a checkout. Notice it's not a cart here, it's a shopping bag. If you click the logo, regardless of what page you're on, you should always go to the home page. If your site implements these conventions, users will have already some familiarity with it because it'll look like other sites. All right, design guidelines. Back in the olden days, like in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, what people did was they didn't think mobile from the start. They thought desktop and laptop from the start because that's how most people looked at virtually anything. Today, as of about the middle of, I think it's around late 2015 or early 2016, more people now reference the internet using mobile media, that being either cell phones, tablets, iPads, etc., than they do with desktops and laptops. Many people will tell you that the desktop is dead. All right, so you should be thinking mobile from the start. There's two ways to provide for mobile devices. All right. The first is to use responsive web design. Then for pages that have to work on mobile devices, you can make them work using what are called media queries. The second way is to build a separate website. Now, as an example, I'm originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I still get an electronic copy of the Milwaukee Journal. So I can go out to jsonline.com and get that. But if I do that, and if I go out right here, just to show you, because I'm on a laptop right now, it brings me out to jsonline.com. Right? On the other hand, if I go out to this on my phone, it goes out to m_jsonline.com, where the M is for mobile. So they built a separate site. All right, so the author says here on the bottom of the page, use responsive web design, build a separate site. When you use responsive design, you can design the mobile web pages first, and then design the, mobile first design. You can design for browsers first. By today's standards, the best way to design is to provide for mobile devices using responsive web design. All right. We're going to go through all of this stuff in here as we build this site. This site will evolve. I can't tell you what it'll look like because, by and large, even though I had some students build one last semester, what I want to do is basically inside of my head right now. So, use the home page to sell the site. Emphasize what your site offers that's valuable, how it differs from competing sites. Emphasize the highest priority tasks of your site. Don't welcome users to the site because it's just a waste of space. Group navigation areas so similar items are next to each other. Only use icons if the users will readily recognize them. Design the home page so it's different from the other pages. Don't include an active link to the home page on the home page. You're already there. Code the title for the home page as the organization name. If the site provides shopping, include a link to a shopping cart. They give you a thing in here that's a little bit old, but this homepage usability by Jakob Nielsen and Marie Taher presents 113 guidelines for home pages, and it says it's dated, but some of the stuff is still classic for lack of better words. All right, let the user know who you are, and it's taking me longer than I thought with this. Highlight active links. The heading for the page should be the same as the link that led to the page. Provide breadcrumbs, which are basically what they've got circled right here. As the site gets more complex, users are likely to lose track of what they are, but even simple sites should always let the user know where they are. Make the best use of space on your home page. So this figure presents an extreme example. All right. And it says, for instance, if you look right here, this is so big, it's below the fold. All right. So you want to keep the header relatively small. Prioritize page components. Give the most important components primary locations. The most valuable space, again, is above the fold. To get the most from it, you need to prioritize and figure out what it is you want to put there. Divide long pages into smaller chunks. Chunking actually is a term. It refers to dividing content into smaller chunks that can be presented or separate web pages in separate components on the same page. It makes information more accessible to the user, reduces the need for them scrolling. If a user has to scroll, make them go up and down, never to the right. People just aren't used to doing that and typically won't do it. Know the principles of graphic design. The 4 principles are alignment, which means that related items on the page should line up with one another. Proximity, which means that related items should be close together. Repetition, which means that you should repeat some elements from page to page for continuity purposes. And contrast, because that's what draws your eyes or your eye to the components on a page. Typographical guidelines, limit line length to 65 characters. Use a sans serif font. We'll talk about that later. Show the relationship between a heading and the text that follows by keeping them close. Use dark text on a light background. Don't use an image for the background. Don't center text. Don't justify text. If you indent the first lines of a paragraph, you don't need to space between paragraphs. Don't reverse type, in other words, white type on a black background. If you aren't a graphic designer, at least you can look at principles like these and hopefully get something out of them. Writing for the web, I already mentioned. That's the way a book would look. That's the way a web can look. You use fewer words. You write in an inverted pyramid style where you go from most important to least important. You use headings and subheadings as necessary. You use bulletized lists and numbered lists as necessary. Use tables, but only for tabular information. Don't use all caps for headings. Make the text for all links as explicit as possible. Never have a link that just says click here. Tell them what they're clicking and where they're going to go to. Again, web users skim and scan. They don't read a book like users do. All right? Next, the life cycle of a website. Design, implement, maintain. And you'll notice that it's in a loop because you keep going back. To make a website easier to maintain, use HTML for the content, CSS for page layout and formatting, and basically JavaScript for interactivity. Don't use tables for page layout. Don't use frames. Get the design right and know what you're doing before you implement it. Procedures for designing a website. Define the audience and set the goals. Develop a sitemap. Sketch or wireframe the critical pages in black and white. Illustrate the critical pages in full color. We're going to do this. A general procedure for implementing a website. Develop the CSS and HTML. Develop the web pages. Deploy them to the server, which is chapter 19 in the next chapter in here. Test and launch the site. Then finally, the general procedure for maintaining the website. Plan for changes, design the changes, implement, test, and launch. So they run through this using the example that's used throughout the book. Number one, define the goals. Define your target audience. Quite often it'll be more than one type of visitor. Second, develop the website. And they show you a sitemap in here. Here's a sitemap for the Muroc.com website. The sitemap should show all of the pages that the website requires and how they link together. You can develop a sitemap in many ways. You can use something like Visio, and there's other things. We're going to go through ours. We'll talk about it later. Step 3, wireframe the critical pages. We're going to use a product, or I'm planning on it, and I've got it so it's made free to the students. It's called Balsamic. All right? We'll do something like this, but ours will look much more professional. Ours will look more along the lines of this. So a wireframe, which is basically what this is a sketch or drawing done in black and white. So the focus is on the components of the page, not on how the page looks. You typically don't need to wireframe every page of the site. All right, illustrate the critical pages. After the wire frames are approved, you start to plan out exactly what you're doing. As far as other design considerations, all right, they talk about development teams in here. A large company is typically designed and implemented by team members, their website. All right. It's important that you understand some terms. They've got web designers, graphic designers. I look at the program here, the application and web development, that you're becoming more of a web developer than you are a web designer. Web designers, like graphic designers, are constantly working to make the page, I think, look better more than anything else. All right. The web programmer, the web developer, is creating the content on the page and making it all work. top-down design and prototyping. All right, as it says, it's a challenging process. With top-down design, you start with the most difficult aspects and you work your way down. A prototype is a limited working model of a website. And that's pretty much it for this chapter. Last things that I want to say, I'll make them short and sweet. Again, I'm going to now start, this was just my beginning, but I'm going to start here. I'm going to go through these 8 chapters. I'm going to go through the CSS. Then I'm going to go through the PowerPoint presentations for each of these 8. Then for these 2, then for these 6, then for these 2, then for these 2. All right? Then I'm going to go, and I think in here, there's the other book, there's about 20 chapters. So I'll go through these 7, then these 5. I guess there's 18 chapters. And then these 6. After I get done with that, I'm going to go back, and while I have the book itself opened, so while it looks more like this, all right, I'm going to start building the site. And the site will be built in many different iterations. I plan on with each chapter putting some more stuff into the site, stuff that went with that chapter. So the majority of it will be done with the HTML book. All right, just so you're aware of that. Okay, and we will also so the most of it will be done with this book. So in other words, we'll start with the introduction. Okay, we'll build an unbelievably simple and ugly web page. Then we'll start to bring in some structure. Then we'll immediately bring in some CSS. All right. What I also want to get into in here is responsive design, get into talking about flexible box layout, grid layout, etc. Everything that's in this book is fair game. In this one, this is going to be more bringing in the interactivity. So we may not make changes for every chapter. I may combine stuff. All right. I hope you got something out of that. This is going to end up being the first lecture that's going to be out there for this class. All right. And I'll see you shortly.